All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our webinar series. We've been doing a lot of these webinars, some of them with just me talking about the stuff I dive deep into so often. And also for newer topics and things that people are asking me about, we're bringing in experts. And today we're talking about real estate. And there is only one company that I have ever asked to join me on a stage or to join me on a webinar, and that is CARR Real Estate. And from CARR, we've got Ken Jorgenson. He is the national director at CARR. He's got experience nationwide, and I've known and been working with CARR for a decade now. Probably seen hundreds of projects on the dental side go through CARR. And so no one else I know is more experienced in the dental real estate world, especially around negotiations and dealing with leases and so forth, than CARR. So everyone, just a few little kind of logistical items. We are going to be taking questions at the end. As soon as you think of a question, please go ahead and post it in the chat. You don't have to wait till the end to post it. If we do run out of time to answer everyone's questions, just know that we're going to find a way to answer your question anyway. We will be reaching out to you if you posted a question that didn't get answered. Also, we've got an offer for you, kind of a special thing that we sometimes do on these webinars, and that'll be on the last slide of the webinar. So stay for that. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. And so if for whatever reason, you've got to bail to go take care of a kid that's crying or something like that and come back, you won't miss anything because you'll be able to rewatch the part that you missed. All right, so let's go ahead and start this thing. Ken, please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, and excited. Been looking forward to this all week. I'm over in Nashville. We're getting ready to get a little bit of a snowstorm, and so we are I have the kids packing up because we're leaving here right after the webinar, so this is going to be a good one. We are going to jump right into maximizing your profitability through real estate. Before I get into why real estate matters for a dental practice, for a startup, for an existing practice, multi-site dental offices, what does real estate have to do with the profitability of a practice, and how do you maximize that? I thought it'd be helpful to give you a quick little snippet or background on CARR. We've been around about 16 years, founded in 2009. We are the nation's leading healthcare real estate advisor. I think I just looked before the call. We have about 4,000 or 5,000 active clients around the country. We have a team of agents, some of the best brokers and agents that are helping providers, dental clients, healthcare clients with their real estate, whether it's leasing, purchasing, site selection, the negotiation, and helping kind of manage that process for our clients. So just a quick snippet. I've been, I think Dr. Leune, I've been coming to your seminars. Obviously, we've been connected for over a decade between the companies, but I've been coming for the last few years and really enjoyed the partnership and being able to work with a number of your clients. One of the things I think that would be good for us to start with is let's take a step back, not just jumping right into what's negotiable in a lease, or is a lease better than a purchase, or any of that kind of stuff. But let's actually take a step back and look at the importance of real estate to a dental practice. So typically speaking, most of the CPAs that we work with around the country, they tell us that the real estate's usually the second highest fixed expense in a practice behind payroll. And the thing about payroll is you can only cut payroll so far before you start losing good people, right? So you have to, so that's not all that negotiable of an item. I mean, obviously it is somewhat, but real estate being the second highest fixed expense, when you have an opportunity to impact that number, to impact that figure, which goes into lease rates and mortgage payments and the triple nets or the operating expenses, all the different things that go into that figure, if you're able to impact that even by a 5 or 10%, 15% swing, that can mean tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So after years of escalations, if you're in a dental office that's been in their space for 5 or 10 or 15 years, typically those leases are significantly overpaying whatever the market is. So every lease is going to have some kind of annual escalator built in. Might be 2%, might be 3%, might be 4%. And those escalators usually are going to outpace the market. Some years not as much as others, but usually after 10, 15 years in a or 10 or 15 years into a lease, what you're going to find is you're here and the market's here, right? So you might be at whatever the number is in your market, 35 a square foot after 10 years into the term, and the rest of the market has only crawled to 31 a square foot, right? So there's a decent delta there. And so every 5 or 10, 15 years, that is a huge opportunity to reduce one of your largest expenses in the practice.
Well, I've got a question about that. If you can go back to that for a second. You know, if we're talking about $5 a square foot difference in this escalation compared to market, you know, and we're talking about a space of like whatever, 2,500 square feet, like that's 12 grand a year that we might be overpaying if we're not on top of this. If I find myself in a lease like that, you know, how far into the lease or how many years left on a lease am I now entering into a period where I could renegotiate those terms?
That's a good question. So typically we say you need to be somewhere between 1 to 2, sometimes 3 years left on that lease. Now, what I would tell you is and the reason we say that is because if you think like a landlord, they have maybe a 7-year or a 10-year term that you've just signed. There's no reason that they need to go in and renegotiate that deal after 2 years, right? But when you are through the term, maybe halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, you've got a couple of years left. That's a really good time to start that renegotiation process, because that gives us enough time to look at the market, look at other opportunities, determine if a ground up project, which could honestly take a couple of years, or a renegotiation of that lease or a relocation, we're going to try to take a look at all the opportunities. And so the landlord knows if we start negotiating that a couple of years out, that we have the right posture in place. With that said, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I might add to that. If we think about, if we threaten to leave, right, and we actually have to leave, it's going to take us a good 12 to 18 months to find a new place, to design it, to construct it. So if we start negotiating this lease too late, where we have less than a year left, the landlord's got us in a spot where, like, you know, we kind of have to say yes to anything he says because we don't have the ability to go move. So I'd like to add to that we also need to take into consideration that if we might move when a lease is out, we're going to need 12 to 18 months. So we should be negotiating this thing with plenty of time to do that as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And when you are in a scenario where what I would say is make sure that you're surrounded with the right team of advisors, because there are scenarios where even if you're only 2 or 3 years into the lease, you can go and find ways to renegotiate certain deal points, or maybe you need a little extra space. Well, that's a great time to say, hey, rather than just adding this 1,000 square feet on next door, let's talk about, let me add this space and renegotiate all of the original terms. Or if you're under, to your point, if you're maybe you're you call up and you have 90 days left in your lease and you're like, wait, I'm at 35. Everybody else here is paying, the space is being marketed at 30. And this, like, what's going on? And obviously you can't move within 2 months. If you've got the right strategy and game plan in place, there are still ways to renegotiate some of those deal points. And we'll get into some of the lease renewal points and what's negotiable and how you kind of walk through that here in a little bit. But that's a big trigger point, because to your point, you save $12,000 a year, $15,000 a year, whatever it is, over a 5 or 10 year term. That's 6-figure savings, and that's cash. That's real money. That's not, I mean, the production value of that, obviously, I mean, is far greater that you're going to have to cover if you make that kind of misstep. All right, let's jump into the next part here. So as you're looking at your real estate, but again, before we even get into what's negotiable and how do I build the right posture, You need to think through the first impressions. And I know this is really big. In the seminars, I hear you talking about this as well, but your brand is being established way before your patient ever even meets you. And so what is the impression when you're walking into your office? What's the impression maybe of your staff? Asking them, how do you feel coming in? How are the ceiling tiles? How's the lighting? What is the feel here? What are your patient's impression of that space? That can really be either positive or obviously detrimental if that's a negative. Research shows the top 4 reasons a patient is returning to a practice. Number 1, the facility. If they feel like it's clean and it is easy to get to, it's well lit, it's the park, it's got good parking, the staff was friendly, front desk staff, support staff, you as the provider, obviously there's a number of things, but facility, your real estate is very important in this whole discussion. So let's talk through, as you're looking at real estate, what the different options are. Quick real estate overview. There are a number of different types of buildings, and each one has pros and cons. The main 4 types of commercial real estate properties. Number 1, you've got office space. This is going to be if you're in a like an office park, a professional park. These are going to, a lot of times you're going to be around title companies or CPAs or attorneys or whatever. You've got retail type buildings. These are going to be the shopping centers. It's going to be your power centers, lots of traffic, lots of eyeballs, lots of visibility. This is where we typically are putting most of the clients that we work with here. They want to be around, synergy. They want synergy. They want to be around activity. They want people coming and going and seeing what's going on. MOBs would be medical office buildings. These are typically going to be attached to like hospitals. Not always, but a lot of times it's going to be a multi-story office building that is all exclusively healthcare. So you can have some synergies there depending on the type of practice you have. But a lot of times you won't get any kind of exclusivity because you're going to have all kinds of different providers in many cases offering the same services there. But there are a lot of pros that we can walk through some of these as well. And then obviously the hospital campus, we don't do that all that often in the dental space, but the main types of properties that our team is typically looking at when we're helping a dental office is going to be on the retail or the office side of commercial real estate.
So Ken, there's a question that came through and I'll read it out loud right now. It says, have you found that the retail areas, the malls or the plazas, so the retail areas that tend to have higher rents, are they worth it to help bring in new potential patients as opposed to a medical complex or a condo for a startup practice? Do you have any thoughts on that? And I'll add some thoughts to it as well.
Yeah. It really has to do with the vision of your practice. I will say, if you look at the model of the practices that grow and scale and expand in any community around the country, you're typically going to see dental practices that are opening up at First and Main. They're looking for the synergy of traffic and activity and energy. If you are opening up a specialty practice, a practice that was relying completely on referrals, maybe a practice that did not need the kind of visibility, then going into a professional park, that's great. You get the savings and the efficiency of not having to pay higher retail prices. But I would say the vast majority of our general dental clients, orthodontic clients, startup clients, they're typically looking in more of the retail, and they count that kind of that delta as a almost in the same mindset as a little bit of a marketing cost, because you're getting that visibility with where you're located.
Okay, so before I give my kind of long answer here, let me ask you, Ken, what might be, I know this is a big question, but what might be a typical difference in cost per square foot between, let's say, a desirable medical office building in a nice growing area versus a shopping center spot?
So I'm out here in Nashville. I would say a nice Class A retail shopping center is probably going to run you about $40 to $50 a square foot, triple net costs. and then an office, a similar office space. Again, it's a couple streets removed from First and Main. You've got to go in. There's maybe 30, 40 buildings. All the parking is shared. You might be in the back of a park. You're going to see that range anywhere from $25 to $35 a square foot. So there's a decent savings on that office side.
Yeah. So let's do the math here. So to Justin, who asked this question, let's say I'm doing a 2,000 square foot startup space. If I decide to elevate up to a Class A real estate spot, like a retail spot in a shopping center that's highly visible, it's going to cost me maybe up to 30 grand a year added rent cost. Your question basically is that worth it? Let's think about the types of patients, how we get patients in the dental practice. Some patients we get through referrals, no matter where we're located. We're not going to get more referral patients because we're visible versus not. Other patients come to us because they did a search. They know they need dentistry. They're actively searching on Google. They're actively searching on social media. And whether we're visible or not, they're going to find us due to our online visibility, not our physical visibility. Well, then who's going to come to us because we're highly visible? Well, that's all the patients that either know they need a dentist and they just haven't searched for one yet. A lot of those people will just pick the one they see every day, or maybe they go work out in a gym and there's a dentist right next door. They see them every morning and they just decide to go there because they know it's there. It's convenient. They've at least familiar with the area. It's that patient. It's also the patient that maybe just drives by every day and notices us. And again, when something comes up, he knows there's a dentist there and he looks for us. Is that worth $30,000 extra cost per year? Well, we'll never know. But in order for us to get in front of the people that are not searching for dentists, from a marketing perspective, we'd have to do things like direct mail or billboards. And that's really expensive. Direct mail, you could drop $4 or $5 grand a month. Easy on direct mail. And so, I think what you're doing here is you're saying, I'm choosing to be the most visible as a startup because it gives me the highest chance of success, even though it costs more. Also, the patients that might look for me online are going to recognize where I'm at when they see me on a map. And we can't measure the effect of that, but you know who does? Patterson, PDS, not Patterson, excuse me, Heartland, PDS, Aspen. They've actually had data scientists build algorithms around real estate data and their patient data to understand the best locations where to put a startup. And all of them are putting them at First and Main. They're all putting them at highly visible spots. So one last little thing, rent might only be 5%, 7% of your collections once you're stable. If it's 4 instead, because you're in a medical office building, may not be a huge difference to your life. But if you're getting 20 or 30 extra new patients a month because you're highly visible, that might be a really big difference. So in general, we tend to want to put a startup in a retail center if it's available, if it's within normal limits, if it's not something ridiculous. That's in general where we want to be. And finally, and I'll shut up here. I'm sorry, Ken, I'm taking over a bit, but finally I'll shut up. A lot of times in retail centers, we can negotiate to be the only dentist or maybe the only general dentist. But man, when you go into a medical office area, there could be a lot of other dentists there. And there's this competitive factor of that as well. All right, I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry about that.
No, I mean, it's all 100% in line. And I think the biggest thing is I'm in the business of real estate, our company is, but we always say, don't put your property ahead of your practice. Like what the vision is for your practice, how you can make it most profitable. Don't feel like I have to get an office because I want the lowest rent rate, or I have to get retail because that's all that I'm interested in, or I have to lease, or I have to purchase. Like, let's take a look at what you're trying to grow, what your vision is, what the plan is. And then to your point, Dr. Leune, look at the market and see what's actually available out there. If there's nothing truly available that is anywhere in range, then yeah, let's look at plan B. But in most cases, if we take a look at the entire area that the demographic analysis kind of points us to, chances are we're going to find a few different options to at least consider. So And again, there's pros and cons of every type of these properties. Signage is a big one. In an office space, you're in a professional park, medical office building, you're not going to get signage. I mean, you're going to get the little plaque that comes on the side, that right on the side of your door. Versus retail, many cases you're going to be able to get sign exposure on the pylon sign, maybe a bigger, more colorful, vibrant branded sign up top of your shop space or whatever. Like there are some different things that you're going to be able to get on the signage for office versus retail. Exposure, how many people are driving, access, is it easy to get in and out? Parking, obviously, for a dental practice can make or break a practice. That's extremely important. And so what does parking look like in some of these shopping centers versus standalone versus an office or medical office or hospital campus? Are they going to have to go into a parking garage? And what does that look like? Does that fit the vision of what you're trying to build here? What are the amenities? I mean, there are some amenities in a more of a medical office type building. But again, it's trade-offs, it's pros and cons. Costs, obviously, we kind of talked about the natural light and the window lines. And in a retail center, that's really important. If you want natural light, you want windows, we're going to have to be very particular about some of the retail centers that we're looking at, or maybe some of the spaces we're looking at, maybe more of an out parcel type space than inline in the shopping center. And then obviously synergy with other tenants. You kind of touched on exclusivity. That can be very important for especially for a startup dentist. And so making sure that we look at not only what exclusivities we can have in these different spaces, but what synergy are we going to get with the other tenants? I mean, I recall, 10 years ago helping a doctor or a new dentist, and she was a pediatric dentist in Tampa, and we jumped in the car, and she said, I was looking at some of these properties, and she actually had a property she wanted to take a look at as well. We drove over to it. It wasn't in my tour packet. I didn't know exactly which property this was, and we drove up to it, and it was a space that looked great on LoopNet. We drove up to it, and then it was between a bar and a hookah lounge. Probably not the best place to open up a pediatric dental office. And so again, what kind of message, what kind of brand are you building with the people that are in the shopping center or the neighboring tenants that you're going to have? It's important, but a lot of times there's all kinds of really good stuff about negotiation and how you can get, how you can get your unfair share in any kind of transaction, any kind of deal that you're working on, whether it's personal or professional. But one of the standard keys in any negotiation is if you can understand and put yourself in the place, in the mindset of the person you're negotiating against. If you can understand what's important to them, you have a way better chance of getting what's important to you. And so understanding their motivations can be really helpful as you walk through this commercial real estate transaction. Things like higher lease rates lead to higher property valuations. In many cases, that might be news to you in terms of like, wait, I've seen this space. It's been sitting vacant for 2 years. I think I should be able to get a screaming deal on it. And then you go start talking to the landlord or a broker, an agent who's helping you, and they say, nope, the rate's going to be still $40, $45 a square foot. And you're like, this has been vacant for two or 3 years. What is going on? Well, every other space in the shopping center is leased up. That space is vacant. If they were to lease that at $30 a square foot, a 50% reduction in rent, or 30, 40, 50, whatever kind of fire sale you're looking for. If they were to do that, the entire property value of their shopping center is now brought down to the valuation of that rent rate of $30 a square foot being spread across the entire shopping center. And the reason that happens is because investors are saying, wait, if you just signed a lease for $30, then that's probably the current true market value. And so when I go to sell my building, if I have 10 leases that are at $45 a square foot and 1 or 2 that are at 30 or 35, my building is going to be valued based on the $30 or $35 lease rate. And so why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if you understand and we negotiate 2 or 3 or 4 leases and you know what's most important. Some landlords are very rate sensitive, like I just talked about. Other landlords could care less about rate, but they can't give any tenant improvement allowance, which we'll talk about in just a second. Tenant improvement allowance can easily be $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 or more in this equation. And so some landlords are cash tight. Some landlords care way more about the lease rate. And so understanding their motivation can really help get you significant concessions. Other location considerations that we would suggest you look at, and obviously I know you walk through this as well in the seminars and in your teaching, but taking a look at a demographic analysis, taking a look at not only the population information, what kind of income ranges, age ranges, kids in the household, education levels. Is this on a growth trend? Is it declining? Is it stagnant? And then obviously also taking a look at competition or referral analysis. Show me some of the ratios. Is this a good place to open up? Is it not a good place to open up? And even, and obviously I know you get into how you look at those and really how you rate, some of those reports. But it is good to take a look at where you're opening up to make sure, like, hey, it's not just because I love this building, but I'm actually making a factual decision, an informed decision to make sure that where I'm going to end up spending the next year and a half of really getting this thing going and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars is really fertile ground, a good place to actually open up a dental office or relocate one. Also, things like parking, zoning and permitting. Obviously, the building needs to be zoned properly. If you're out there, we helped a client, again, just a few years ago, got introduced to a client who said, I bought this building, can you help me get out of it? And we don't do any listings. We're only on the tenant side. We only help dentists as a tenant or a buyer of real estate. We don't list any properties. But we had somebody that said, hey, can you help me list? I just bought this and I realized I can't actually open up here. This isn't zoned properly. And I've gone to 2 or 3 of the city council meetings and they're not willing to rezone it and whatever. So zoning, permitting, those are big aspects of this whole commercial real estate process, and making sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one question was, is it difficult to change a residential property into a commercial property for the goal of constructing your practice?
It can be. It depends on the municipality. And so if it's in a historical district, which I'm guessing it would be, if you're looking at that kind of you wouldn't go typically transition a house into a dental office. But if you're in like one of the downtown corridors and there's this old 1910 house that was maybe an office, if you're looking at building a dental space there, that can be difficult depending on the parking. Obviously, that can be an interesting build out with the age, and in most cases, those development committees will be very involved in how you are allowed to build that space out. So in terms of cutting flooring and walls and all that kind of stuff, yes, you can do it. We have done it, but it is much more of an involved process. And then you go into site review and those costs. Obviously, you want to make sure that as you're considering locations, if you have one space here, you're considering 2 different spaces. You have one that is a cold gray shell, like nothing is, meaning nothing is in there. There's not even concrete, and everything's going to have to be brought in. It's a blank canvas. And another is built out walls, plumbing. I mean, it's all in, and you're going to have to come in and demo that and then start from scratch. Obviously, taking account and taking or having a discussion with a general contractor or an architect or a team that's done this before will be able to help walk you through what some of those, what the difference between option A and option B is going to be, and then you just have to weigh which one is obviously worth it.
Yeah, here's a great example. In Texas, if you're going into a space that's never been constructed before, you don't have to pay tax on the construction of the space. But if you are demoing a previously constructed space, then you have to pay tax on that. And it's a little thing, but that little thing could be like 20 grand or something, it definitely hits the budget. So these are reasons why you need an experienced person helping you on the real estate side, as well as an architect that is going to be designing everything and kind of telling you these types of things to expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Those impact fees and
Sorry,
those
looks like my computer froze. The architect's going to be telling you these types of things to expect. And of course, you'll be getting the bids back from the contractor. All right. I know we're falling a little bit behind here, so I'll try not to butt in as much here. Continue.
That sounds good. One of the biggest questions that we get is around the country is it better to purchase or lease my real estate? And is it I own my house, or I want to own my house? So I think I should probably buy. This is a very common question, especially with startups or existing practices. And so the truth of the matter is there's no one size fits all answer. You really need to take a look at things like, how does it impact your cash flow? What is your short-term versus your long-term goals? Are you going to be in practice for 5 more years, or you got 25 years ahead of you? What are the principal pay down and the equity? What is your access to the financing solutions? What is that going to look like? How quickly are you going to be able to pay that off? Or would it be better for you to take the money, the additional money that a purchase may cost, and put that into a lease, or into better marketing, or another location, or satellite, or whatever we're looking at? What are the tax implications? There's tax implications on a lease, and benefits on the lease side. And then there are obviously implications on the purchase side as well, and things you can write off and deduct and depreciate and all that.
Without getting into the details, would you agree with me that in general, dentists looking to do startups in very high growth areas with awesome demographics, those areas have really expensive real estate to own? And those dentists have very few assets and no existing practice to lean on. And so the typical startup dentist is going to be leasing. But then when you go into like the second half of our career as dentists, where we're not in a startup practice, we know how profitable things are, and we can move our practice. It doesn't have to be in Class A real estate by that point, because we've got a patient base already. If we have some assets we could leverage, sometimes those dentists might really benefit from kind of a longer term real estate approach of owning a building that has an ideal tenant like a dentist in it. And when they sell the practice, they could still be a landlord. That becomes more of a reality as we get older. Of course, there's outliers on both ends. Would you agree with those statements?
Yeah, 100%. I would say our team probably sees upwards of 85-90% of our startup dental clients, they're starting out on the lease side, just because of some of the concessions that you get, and some of the benefits you get on the front end. And then when you've been in practice 5, 10, 15 years, at that point, we help more providers looking and moving into purchase opportunities. Absolutely. The negotiation, we kind of talked through this a little bit, but time frame is extremely important. If you're looking at a lease renewal, and your landlord just sent you over the lease document to sign, and you have 30 days until the end of your lease, that's not a great position to be in. So knowing the timing and the right time frames is really important, and putting those triggers in your calendar, or having some lease management software or something to help you can be really helpful. So a new lease or purchase, we're looking at somewhere between 9 to 12 months. You want to start that, and in many cases, some markets, it's really 12 to 18 months. So it just depends on how long the city takes with permitting and architects and the construction and all of that kind of stuff. Some of these markets, I know, are a little bit over a year, but we would say somewhere between that 9 to 12 month mark. If you said, hey, I want to open up in a year from now, well, today's the day to get started. Tomorrow's the day. It's not like, hey, I'll start sometime this summer and hope to be open by December, because that just typically is not the time frame that we work with. A lease renewal, again, you want to be somewhere around a year, give or take. We've helped clients with 2 or 3 years left. We've helped clients with 3 days left, but on average, you have the best posture and positioning if you've got about a year left. And then land, if you're looking at building, maybe you've been in practice and you want to go build your own building and go from the ground up. There's a lot more involved, a lot more parties involved in this kind of transaction, a lot more meetings with the city and the county and the traffic analysis folks, and you're going to have to get impact environmental studies done and all that kind of stuff. So Typically, that's going to be around a 2-year, 18-month to 2-year transaction. So let's talk through a few of the points. A lot of times we get clients and they say, okay, just tell me how much it's going to cost. What's the rate? What's the rate? What's the rate? And they want a 5-year, 7-year, 10-year. What's the rate and term? And the truth of the matter is, a lease would not be 70 pages long if it just came down to rate and term. There's so many other things that are involved and that are negotiable, and that can mean as much, if not more, than saving an extra 50 cents or $1 on the square foot lease rate. And so some things like tenant improvement allowance, this is money that the landlord will bake into the deal and give you at the start of your at the lease signing. They're going to give you some money, or sorry, as the construction goes on, or once you open up, they actually pay you back some money. But this can, in many cases, it's usually a square foot, a price per square foot. So it might be $50 a square foot, might be $30. In some cases, it might be $75, $80, $90 a square foot that the landlord is going to give you to build out your space. Well, if in your market, the dental space costs $200 a square foot to build, and your landlord is offering you $75 a square foot, or maybe $100 a square foot, if they covered half of your build out cost, because you are improving their building, you are bringing additional value to their building, then that can be a very big benefit to a lease, obviously, versus a purchase. And your bigger retail centers, your Class A retail centers, they're typically going to have more in the way of tenant improvement allowance than some of your more mom and pop type landlords or smaller shop space centers. Things like build out time frame. You might not think that's a huge deal to negotiate, but you will sign the lease. Then you've got sometimes 5 months, sometimes 7 months, sometimes 9 months, whatever has been negotiated. But that build out time frame is extremely important. You don't want to be paying rent before you're actually open, before you're actually opened up for business. And in many cases, you might think, oh, they're being nice. They offered me 4 months to build out my space, and so I should be open by summer. But then you talk to Leune, or you talk to a general contractor, and you realize, wait a second, I'm not going to be open until October, November, or the bids are coming back in and they're giving me a different timeline. Well, once the lease is signed, it's a legal document. And so having this build out time frame on the front end is really important. How is this space going to be delivered to you? Are they going to be doing any work ahead of time? What about free rent? Maybe you get some time, some months before you actually have to start paying the rent rate after you're actually open. We usually try to go for a month or 2, sometimes even 3 months of free rent, so that you can be seeing patients. And we know you're not, in most cases, collecting cash. You're waiting for the insurance folks to pay you back. And so we negotiate that into the deal. Things like exclusivity or signage, parking, the liabilities, who takes care of a broken air conditioning unit or a roof leak or a door that becomes jammed or whatever. Things like annual increases or rights of first refusal if you want to buy it, or you want to maybe lease the space next door. All that stuff is negotiable. And in many cases, that can be just as important as the rate and the term. So those are some of the negotiable items in a lease. And to get and maximize your profitability, to get the most amount of concessions and be paying the most aggressive lease rate, the lowest lease rate possible in a market, posture is mandatory. And so posture, meaning you have the upper hand in that negotiation, right? So if you go in and you're like, hey, I live right behind here, you call the name on the side of the building, and you're like, hey, you're talking to the listing agent. Hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I live right behind my wife. We shop at this grocery store. My kid goes to school right across the street. I love this space. I want this space. Can I come in and see it? And you're talking with one person and you're giving away all your posture, all the negotiation stance. That's not great. You're not going to get a good deal. But if you go into the negotiation and you have a team around you that says, hey, we're touring Dr. So-and-so. We've got 8 locations we're taking a look at, and you are one of the top 3 or 4. But if you want a shot at this, you're going to have to sharpen your pencil. That's a completely different place that negotiation starts. Because when you pick up the phone and talk to a listing agent, everything you say on that phone call can and will be used against you during that negotiation. And it can equate to tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ken. So I'd like to put it in kind of simple terms here.
Yeah.
It's like when we negotiate real estate, we're playing poker. And it's unfortunate sometimes that it comes down to that. But this is not just a click transaction, open free market where we have all the inside of everything and we get the fair price. No, it's a poker game. There's a lot of give and take, push and pull that can happen. When we use a company like CARR that negotiates this for a living, not only do they understand how to play poker really well, but they can look up to see what that landlord has rented to dentists in the past, or what other properties they own, or what the general kind of terms are in the area for dentists. In other words, they know some of the cards that your opponent, the landlord, has in their hand. And if we can find more than just one location in the area that we're interested in, then we can walk away from any negotiation that isn't going our way. And that might make the negotiation go our way. We can say, we've got 3 or 4 properties we're looking at. We're going to be putting in, $400,000 or $500,000 of construction. We're a doctor with that license, with the second lowest failure rate of any tenant you could have in the country. And we're wanting to sign a long-term lease and elevate the visibility of this center. But, it's got to be competitive, right? And we already know what rates are normal. So this is not a fair poker match when we have someone like CARR on our side and we've got multiple locations we're looking at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And we had a client that, again, toured him on multiple locations. He was like, Ken, I just like this one. And I said, Doc, that's great. I need you to throw in option 2 and 3. I know they're backup. I know you don't like them. I know that they're distant second and third place, but throw them in. And we did so. We ran the purchase or the lease analysis, and option B came back to us, and he came back to us with 24 months of free rent. Mm-hmm. So he said, I can't really do much on the rate, but I got 2 years of free rent to start this 10-year term. And he gave us some tenant improvement allowance too. Well, that in that client's mind, he was like, wait a second, I need to reevaluate this now. Option B is now looking like a really decent space. Now I need to go back and take a look. And he ended up going there. And I said, Doc, you need to put that money away, because you don't want to get to year 3 and all of a sudden you're now having to cut a rent check, and you haven't been for the last 2 years. Well, he actually took some of that and opened a second location because of what he was able to do on that front end. And so again, that landlord understanding their motivation and having the right posture of multiple options got that doctor the best possible deal. And we always say, you can't blame a landlord for being a landlord. It's how they feed their family. And if you could sell your house for $100,000 more, you would do the same thing, right? So, and you wouldn't feel bad about it. You'd feel great. You'd be high-fiving your friends. So one of the ways landlords determine fair market value in a lease rate or in the market is what is the maximum amount I can get a tenant to pay? That's fair market value to a landlord. And so we try to turn those tables and level the playing field a little bit and make sure that you have multiple options. That's how you get the right posture. So obviously we talked about startups, relocations, expansions, group practices, multi-office opportunities, purchases, if you're looking at a lease versus a purchase or ground up, and then obviously lease renewals. A lot of times there are dentists that are out there doing deals themselves or trying to run these negotiations, even on lease renewals themselves, not realizing that this is a point where you should be able to get some good concessionary savings and movement in your lease if you have the right posture, like we just talked about, and the right strategy in place. So, we'd say whether you use CARR or somebody else, we want you to understand that representation is crucial. It removes you from that discussion, meaning you're not emotionally charged. You're not giving away posture. You're not the one giving away the strategy here. And you actually have somebody that has a proven game plan and strategy to get you the concessions we just talked about, and the dozens of others that are negotiable during that lease discussion. You really should know the parties to the transaction. A listing agent, their fiduciary, if you're calling somebody on the side of a building, their fiduciary is to the landlord. Their job is to get the highest lease rate and give out the least amount of concessions possible. I'm sorry, the slide was just clicking and it was confusing me for a second. And so the key to that is just making sure that you know who is representing you, that you actually have the representation. Couple common mistakes: believing that the landlord or seller is going to offer their best terms, or allowing them to be the ones to initiate that negotiation. You don't want to do that. You want to be the one starting this process, and not just relying on advice from, hey, my neighbor over here pays this or that. If they got taken advantage of, it doesn't mean you should get taken advantage of either. I'm gonna go through these here pretty briefly, just because I know, number one, I know we're up against the clock, but also we have some great relationships. I know you point people to, I think, Demographics, if that's right, and a couple of others. There are some really good companies that provide good insight, good intel on the dental space, and we are big believers. We don't make emotional decisions. We make factual, data-driven decisions with our clients. And so things like competition analysis reports or maps, or population density, growth rates, population growth. There are reports that will show you what the growth rate is going to look like in different counties over the next 5 years, based on what's being submitted to the zoning or development committee in the area, and what the census data is showing for growth. Things like, where does the population live? What is the average household income? And then where are, sometimes you drive around town and you're like, I see a bunch of trees, but I didn't realize that there are 4,000 rooftops behind those trees, right? So sometimes it's hard to tell. And these research and analysis reports can be very helpful as you look at that. If you've got an existing practice, many times we help them with what are called patient-based heat maps, where you can, in real time, kind of zoom in and out and take a look at neighborhood by neighborhood where your patients live and where they're coming in from, where they're driving in from. If you're looking at opening a second location or relocating or satellite locations, these are definite reports and analysis that can help. And then
I'm so sorry. Could you go back to that slide? Because there's something interesting here. I've got a client I coach. For those of you that don't know, I coach people one-on-one. And one of my clients has a couple very large practices, and those practices are full. They dropped all insurances. They're super profitable. They don't have any more ops. They don't have any more hours. And we ran a patient-based heat map to figure out where were all those patients coming from, and saw there was an opportunity to open a second location that was close enough that it could take some of the excess demand away, but far away enough that it was going to capture all new demand as well. And that was based on this specific map. That one map, having that intelligence, gave us a lot of confidence in understanding where to put that next location. And of course, they're doing really well right now.
When you lead with data and intel, it really removes a lot of the question mark and the nerves. I mean, this real estate's a big transaction. It's a big move. But when you can do it with the actual data and information, it helps give you confidence that you're making the most informed and the best decision possible. This is just a quick example. And this is one of our tools we use with our clients that show, hey, when we try to always negotiate with 3 or 4 properties simultaneously. When you negotiate simultaneously with a few, it makes all the landlords have to sharpen their pencil, like I said before. And so you're going to look at not only rate term, but annual escalations and months of free rent, build out time, tenant improvement allowances, and all the different things that go into that. And then again, what our recommended counters would be. Same thing on a purchase versus lease. And I'll kind of zoom in here, but it's important to kind of take a look at what at the end of the day, what's my monthly figure going to look like? And then after taxes, before taxes, what is it going to look like in 10 years? And so again, we want to lead. This isn't like you're buying a house and I need to fall in love with the kitchen or the lot or the master bedroom or whatever. This is a business decision. And so we like to make sure that you are taking a look at all of the information possible. And there's a lot on here, obviously, and we could take even more time going line by line or whatever, but the big idea here is that you're just looking at intel, demographics, mapping, competition, analysis, the evaluation of multiple spaces side by side. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I love this specific slide you've got here. So as a startup practice, when are the highest risk moments financially speaking? I'm just a rhetorical question. As a startup, when are we at risk really? It's in those first 1 to 2 years when we're building a patient base. We're trying to ramp up collections, yet a lot of our bills are fixed or staying the same. They're there. So those first 2 years, it's important for us, if possible, to have CARR negotiate more affordable rent rates or free rent where we pay nothing. And so by analyzing the properties this way by year, we start to understand which properties are unfortunately front loaded in risk, which properties are, to our benefit, more back loaded in risk. Also, depending on the size of the property, depending on the amount of tenant improvement allowance there is and what the costs are going to be to build something that big or build something that small, this impacts our initial budget. So while we might have a lower rent rate in practice or in property A is really big and the construction costs are going to kill us. Or we might go to property B that's a more modest size and we can afford the construction costs while the rent might be slightly higher. So it takes, what I'm trying to say is it takes some analysis, some math, some budgeting. And if we have multiple locations and CARR is holding our hand and working through the budgeting process, it gives us a lot of confidence and understanding that we really are picking the right one and we know what we're getting into.
Yeah. Yeah. The representation, the one of the questions we get quite often is, well, how much is this going to cost? How much do I pay to have you help me walk through this? And the answer to that is it's really a no-brainer to use, whether it's CARR or another. Obviously, I would suggest you use our team. We've got the most we've got the strongest and best team out there. But whether you use us or somebody else, representation is crucial because it comes at no charge to you. It's just like in residential real estate the landlord has a fee set aside. They pay their broker or their agent, and landlords have professional representation. They use brokers and they use attorneys. They're not out there doing their own thing. And so in the same way, if you can get that representation at no charge because that fee is split between the landlord's tenant and the buyer's tenant or tenant, the tenant's broker, then you get that representation, you get that help and that support and that guiding throughout the process at no charge. And this can be easily a 6 or sometimes 7-figure investment that you are looking at, whether it's a lease or a purchase. And so there is way too much at risk to try to DIY this thing. And give away the posture and not know how to negotiate or what you're negotiating. And so we would always say, don't use cousin Eddie, who's a residential broker. If you're looking at agents in the market, we would suggest use somebody that's healthcare specialized. You want somebody that knows the healthcare space. You want somebody that's commercial real estate, not just residential. Residential is not commercial. I am a broker. I've been a broker for 10 years. I don't do my own residential deals because I don't know that space. I haven't spent time there, and my residential brokers helped me save on quite a few deals over the years because they know that space better than anybody else, and it's worth that. And then buyer tenant representation only. Do not work with listing agents or brokers that are listing space that are working for landlords. You are not going to get. This is actually how our entire company was built from day one. Was tenant buyer representation only. We wanted to remove any conflicts of interest. We never work for landlords, never work for sellers, because there's a huge issue when the same party represents both sides. You would never have the opposing party's attorney represent you in a court case. And in the same way, you should never have a listing agent representing you in a commercial real estate transaction. That's what I got. There's a ton of information, blogs, evaluations, examples of the mapping and demographics. The one you mentioned about the patient-based heat mapping. We've got FAQs. We've got glossary of commercial real estate terms. If you've heard something and you wonder what that means, if you simply Google it, many times the CARR website will come up there in the top of the search. But if you go to our website, you can see all kinds of things. What's negotiable in a lease, or the 21 factors. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So if you take that QR code or that website, you can get to me, my information, or our team's information, and a ton of additional resources right there on the site.
All right, so we're going to dive deeper in these moments we have left, and we've got some questions that we're going to ask, so we can kind of get into some more details. Before I do that, I promised y'all would have a nice gift or an offer. So any of you that have not been to one of my events, encourage you to research it. You'll see, I'm sure that there's some of the best events in dentistry for business training. Specifically, I've got one on startups that is just really, really cool. So there is a discount code right there, and that is a significant discount. That discount alone will probably pay for your flight and hotel. So if you were wanting to or planning to come to one of my events in the future, look them up, use that discount code while you can. And that is kind of our thank you for being on this webinar with us. Okay, so let's dive deeper and let's look at some of these questions that were asked. So one question asked was, can the lease or the rent, can it still be negotiated when purchasing an existing practice that only has a couple months until closing? I'm not so sure I understand the question. Let me read word for word. Can the lease, and then in parentheses rent, still be negotiated when purchasing an existing practice with only a couple of months until closing?
My guess is they're talking about a practice acquisition, closing on that practice acquisition, maybe. And yes, we renegotiate those leases. We look at it as a lease renewal because when we go to the landlord and we say, hey, your current tenant is selling the practice, we represent the buying tenant. And their term is up or going to be up soon, and we would like to renegotiate this deal, and we take them to market. So we try to evaluate a couple different options, and yes, it is definitely a trigger point for negotiation there.
Excellent. Okay, next question was, what software showed that heat map?
So it's a program that we have at CARR. We utilize probably 7 or 8 different database systems. Esri, Data Axle, Sites USA, but you will pay, I mean, we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for that information. So I'm guessing some of that is available to the general public or on a one-off deal. But if you get connected to us, those are things that we offer at no charge to our clients.
Excellent. Next question. Is it difficult to sell the real estate of a standalone dental office that you fully own?
No, dental real estate is a premium. I mean, if you are working with the right team, and again, we don't ever list space, but if you had a dental space that was available in the market, I would 1000% suggest you get with the healthcare agents in your market, CARR and others, and say, I have a dental space. And the reason is because the dental office is one of the most expensive dental build outs. And so your space has a premium. I'm not going to have to take 12 months to build out a space and put the plumbing lines in and do all this and get it zoned and all that kind of stuff. As long as it's a decent build out, there is tremendous value there, and it would not be difficult to sell that.
Also, if that practice has a long-term lease, dentists are some of the very most valuable tenants in kind of the small business tenant world. There are, shoot, if you want to sell a building that has a dentist in it, you can send a message to me. I'll get you a buyer immediately. So it's very easy to sell buildings like that. Next question. What if the dental practice is the only practice in a small town next to a liquor store? That was an earlier question when we were talking about locations, I think. And so maybe they're asking, hey, there's a spot available, but it's next to a liquor store, but I'd be the only dentist in a small town. I would approach that as saying, while we don't necessarily want to be next to things like a liquor store, I've actually owned a startup that was right next to a liquor store that had bars on the windows, but it was the only location available. It was highly visible. The demographics were wonderful, and that practice did extremely well. Just because there's a tenant that's not as upscale as you doesn't mean you can't look and be upscale. And remember, a whole lot of your patients are picking you from word of mouth and through online searches. They're not standing in front of the liquor store just trying to decide if they're going to walk into your place. However, obviously, it would be good to be around tenants that are aligned in your vision. And one thing you didn't say, Ken, that might be a good time to say something about this is when we negotiate leases, it'd be great to negotiate a first right of refusal for the spaces that are next door to what you're wanting. So that if that liquor store ever moves or goes out of business, you can maybe take it over and expand your practice if you wanted. Or what about first right of refusal to purchase a building? Especially if it's a standalone building, you're the only tenant. So those first rights of refusal could also be valuable things for you in the long run that doesn't really cost the landlord anything. Did I say that right, Ken?
Yep, 100%. Right of first refusal, and lease options as well, making sure that you have the ability to renew once the lease expires. All those things are very important to have and negotiate. Obviously, you may not be able to get a right of first refusal on the purchase if it's a retail center, but if it's a standalone building or a mom and pop landlord, in many cases, you can get some of that, and then they have to offer you the opportunity to buy it before they sell it to anybody else.
Yeah. Another question that I'm not sure if you could answer this, Ken, but the question from Jonathan was, what are some good strategies to work with your retail neighbors to promote each other? Do you have any experiences with that or any thoughts on that?
It really depends on the makeup of the who the tenants are and what type of business they have. Obviously, having good relationships is beneficial and important. We've seen some cross promotion with dental practices, and especially on like the pediatric side with like froyo type companies or different companies that cater to kids or families or things like that. But it really is dependent on who's in the shopping center. But that's probably as deep as we go there, just looking at the other tenants and who would make sense to do some kind of cross promotion effort with.
Yeah. Another question. How do you stand out as a new GP startup in a saturated area? And then they say, I know you recommended retail areas. I've been told to look into buildings. Based on what you've said so far, retail is the best way. So how do you stand out as a new GP startup in a saturated area? So first of all, hopefully we're not building startups in saturated areas. If we can find areas that need another dentist, obviously that's where we should be looking. We better have a really good reason to be wanting to put a practice where they don't need another dentist. But if you are going into an area where there's not a lot of extra need for a dentist, what you want to see a few things. First, you want to make sure a whole lot of people live there. High population density, because if 100,000 people live in a 5-mile radius versus 10,000 people, that means 10 times more people are looking for a dentist in any given month. And so lots of people need to live there. Second thing is you want to be as visible as possible. You almost are forced to go into the very best locations you can find because you are having to outcompete the other dentists in the saturated area for the eyeball of the patient. You want to be highly visible. Next, you want to be marketing heavily and smartly and handling your phones really well so that, you are fishing with lots of bait, trying to pull in these patients in this saturated area where there's other fishermen. You need to throw in more bait, and it needs to be better bait, and you need to be better at pulling it in with your phones, right? And then finally, you need to be marketable, meaning, are you open in an evening throughout the week? Do you accept some insurances? Do you have aspects of your branding and your social media presence that are highly desirable? Do you do online scheduling? Do you have patient amenities? You got to be sweeter bait. And so this is a real estate discussion, obviously, but your question is a loaded question. You can be really successful in a saturated area as a GP, but now you've got to lean into these things pretty hard so that you can outcompete the other normal GP practices that haven't leaned into them. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Ken, that I didn't say?
No, I think obviously the first point is important, that would not maybe be the most ideal scenario, and that's why looking at the data and intel ahead of time would be good. But there are 1,000% numerous ways that even in a saturated market, that you can make yourself stand out and you can grow and build the, what you did. I mean, the $1 million practice. Like, I mean, there are strategies to do it if you have the right team and the right game plan that you're following.
So, a lot of dentists, a lot of us think, and especially in the startup world, success comes from new patient flow. But, when we look at success, let's just name success, first of all, as enough collections. Let's say we want to, by year 2 or year 3, collect $2 million a year and take home $1 million, 50% overhead on a $2 million practice. Okay, well, we need to get to 2 million collections. Well, where does collections come from? It doesn't just come from new patients. It comes from new patients that have diagnosed dentistry who say yes and pay. And so if you look at that flow, yeah, we could have a lot of new patients, but if we'd only diagnose half as much, we end up in a lower spot. We could have half as many of the new patients. But if we know how to do a lot of procedures and we diagnose well, we could be twice as big, right? And then, of course, if we got good case acceptance systems and we collect well, like all of those things are equal importance. And new patient flow isn't just about the demographic of the area. And it's not just about the marketing. It's about our ability to answer the phone and to say the right thing and to have the right policies that people actually schedule. Only 29 appointments are made out of every 100 attempts for a new patient to call a practice. 100 new patient calls on average only results in 29 appointments. Do you need more calls? Maybe we need to convert more. Maybe that question about being in a saturated area, maybe I should have added to that answer that says, not only do we want to be highly visible and market well, we need to be good at converting phones. We need to be expert diagnosticians, and we need to have good case acceptance systems. And man, we may outgrow these other practices that are slammed with new patients. Maybe we're not slammed with new patients, but we're slammed with business success because of the other things. One last thing I want to say. Oh, there's another question that came in. And then we're going to wrap this up just so everyone knows. The next question from Shannon said, for a dentist planning to retire within 2 to 3 years, is it best to renegotiate the lease terms or take on an associate with hopes to phase out? So I'm thinking maybe they're saying, okay, I think I want to retire in 2 to 3 years, maybe sell the practice in 2 or 3 years. Should I bring on an associate and phase myself out and they take over? Or should I renegotiate the lease terms? I'm not quite understanding the question, Shannon. If you could restate the question in a different way, I think that would help us. But while I'm waiting for you to restate the question, let's ask something different. If I know I'm going to retire within 2 to 3 years, does that impact how I might look at my lease? What if I have 8 years left on my lease? Or what if I have 3 years left on my lease? Should I renegotiate this lease so that I extend it beyond when I want to retire so that the new buyer continues? Or should I keep the lease like shorter so that the new buyer can like get out of it if they want? Is there an advantage one way or the other to me?
We would typically say that it would be better for you to, even if you renegotiate a shorter term, to renegotiate a shorter term that has a couple of 5-year options. You may or may not want to do another 10-year term, but maybe you do a 5-year and you get 1 or 2 options. Most buyers are going to want to have at least the ability to be in the location that they're buying for another 10 years. And most banks are going to require it. And so you want to have the options in that lease. If you only have 2 years left and you don't have any options, that's going to be a tough acquisition just because the landlord or the lender is going to require it. And at that point, the landlord holds the cards. So I would suggest you look at even if it's a short-term renewal, but that you get some options placed in there as well.
Yeah, Shannon, it might seem counterintuitive. You might be thinking, well, I don't want to negotiate a longer lease because maybe that puts me on the hook for longer. But no, the actual truth is a buyer doesn't want to buy the practice and the bank won't fund a practice acquisition if there's not enough years left on that lease. So I'd like to add to what Ken said. Not only could you kind of just negotiate an extension option for the buyer, but you should also, while you're at it, see if you can negotiate the ability to assign your lease to a buyer that is of similar financial situation as you so that you can be released from the lease when you sell the practice. There's many legal strategies to do that, but can we get a healthy lease that has options for the buyer to extend it? And also, can we negotiate to where when we do sell our practice within normal situation, can we be released from the personal guarantee and pass it on to the new buyer? Did I say that right, Ken?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I just having the options and having the term left that makes a buyer feel confident that they're not going to get kicked out and that their rate isn't going to get escalated like crazy is really helpful during that practice acquisition.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for logging into this webinar. I hope that there was something on this that was helpful to you. If you need to get a hold of CARR and Ken, we showed that previous slide. I'll show it right now. CARR, CARR.us. And of course, we also had the offer for you to save some money on one of my events if that's something you want to do in the future. Ken, thank you so much for doing this for us and for giving your time to the group and teaching them something in this convenient, short session. Is there any last thing you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I appreciate the opportunity and would be honored to meet any of you that have needs and get you introduced to the local agent in your market. It'd be a pleasure to help you.
Okay. Follow me on Instagram at dr.scott.leune. You can always ask me a question directly there if you want. You can always get updates on our stuff there as well. Ken, thank you so much. Great to see you again. And guys that logged in, I will see you next time on our next webinar. Last thing I need to say though, we are super excited because we're launching a podcast called the Dental CEO Podcast. We have a little title there, a Dental CEO Podcast. I wish I could tell you who I've interviewed yesterday. Some names everyone in the country will recognize. I really encourage you to go to dentalceopodcast.com, log in, subscribe. Trust me, it's going to be people that you're really happy you're listening to. It's going to be a really cool podcast inside and outside of dentistry where we talk about how to be that next level CEO that we need to be. All right, we're done for the evening. Ken, thank you so much. And I will see everyone next time on our next webinar. Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.